Good morning and welcome to CROSSFIRE. It's another beautiful Friday in the city of Lagos. My name is AGHA-INEH, and yesterday we began talking about a very interesting topic, to restructure Nigeria or not. Now, yesterday we had an interesting guest who was able to lay his own perspectives, and according to him, he said what Nigeria needed was not a restructuring, but a re-evaluation of our value system and principles in Nigeria. Reintroduction of integrity, enforcement of integrity, and making sure that Nigerians grow with that principle to help the country move forward. Now, today we'll still be talking about that topic, to restructure Nigeria or not. But then I have an interesting guest in the studio who will be doing justice to the topic today. He is no other than Professor Wazobia Jr., and he is the Director General of the Change Ambassadors of Nigeria. He is also a comrade in the fight for a new Nigeria. Join me welcoming Professor Chris to the studio. You're welcome to CROSSFIRE.
My pleasure to be here. Sure.
I hope it wasn't difficult getting here, considering the traffic situation in Lagos. It's a Friday.
No, I had to leave pretty early.
See, good. Thank you for joining us. Of course, you know the big question: should Nigeria be restructured or not? What's your perspective?
I think that first, I'll start with the Christian scripture that says that if the foundation be faulty, if the foundation be destroyed, what can the righteous do? I believe that fundamentally, nationhood is not just about people. It's about an ideal, it's about a structure, it's about a space, it's about a philosophy. And when I had the privilege of listening to your guest yesterday, I listened to the program, and I had a chuckle over several of the issues, because when you talk about re-evaluation of values, it suggests that there is a foundation from which you're proceeding. If you're talking about a family, there is a name, a family name, there is a structure, there's an organogram upon which whatever exists devolves. Don't forget that even when Jesus Christ, who happens to be one of the greatest that ever had been through the space, when he came, the Bible went in and told us about his genealogy. Sure. And so and so gave birth to this, and this gave birth to this, and this gave birth to this before he came to Christ. Okay? Same applies to the story of Prophet Muhammad, peace be unto him. There's a family nexus that must be established for you to expect values. That's why in normal African practices, they say, whose son is he? How were his ancestors? What kind of family is he from? You're talking about values. Now, values have to devolve from somewhere. It does not drop from space. True. And now, if you're saying that Nigerians need values, value orientation, they must first of all understand why they are Nigerians. To what extent, what is the national vision? What is the national dream? What is the national trust? What is the purpose for which we aggregate as a people, as a country? And I want to say without fear of querulous critics that oftentimes when people try to moralize, they forget that what is most important in the discourse is who we are and why we are where we are. And I say this without disputation, that the Nigerian superstructure, as it is today, does not inspire patriotism. The Nigerian superstructure does not inspire values, does not inspire confidence. And I'll tell you why. So
indirectly, you're saying what we need now is restructuring.
Oh, obviously. That's exactly. No, let me, okay. When I hit the nail on the head, you'll find a way. You know, always, the Americans have values in leadership because they went through periods and processes of negotiation, period and processes of structuring. You know, they started with the Federalist Papers. At independence, what America had was basically a confederate structure. First, the Confederation of 13 states. And then later, they went through a lot of dialogue, renegotiations based on the Federalist Papers and arguments. And then they adopted federalism at independence. Now, even after that, some states insisted on confederal structure. That led America to the Blue and the Red War, the Civil War. And then after that, they went further to discuss, and then they had certain amendments and came by a federal structure. Now, when the people have what they want, when their country belongs to them, you begin to talk about values, you begin to talk about patriotism, you begin to talk about understanding, you begin to talk about inclusiveness. Since 1900s, and then the 1914 amalgamation, and then the Civil War, Nigerians have not established fundamental nexus as to why we have to be together as a people. So we have to discuss that. We have to negotiate the terms of our collective existence, and thereupon can the values of value orientation, can those practices be established.
Okay, before we go in further on the program, do stick around. We'll be going on a short commercial break. This is to Wazobia Max UHF 57 Crossfire. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and this is still Crossfire. Dr. Banjo is unavoidably absent on the program today, but yes, ISHIOMA is here to do justice to the program together with our guest. Now, amongst some of the people, a lot of people have come out to lend their voices to the agitation that Nigeria needs restructuring. And one of those persons is the former Vice President of Nigeria, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. Now, in his words, he's of the opinion that restructuring will be for Nigeria's national unity. Now, he was quoted as saying, "We must refrain from the habit of assuming that anyone calling for the restructuring of our federation is working for the breakup of the country." Now, an excessively powerful center does not equate with national unity. If anything, it has made our unity more fragile, our government more unstable, and our country more unsafe. We must renegotiate our union in order to make it stronger.
I totally agree. But you know what? What worries me and bothers the carapace of my mind is the fact that whilst they were there for 8 years, why didn't they proactively pursue that? But be that as it may, the time is always right to do right. And I do sincerely think that if we truly want a united, a peaceful, and a great country, we must look at how we redesign our superstructure. That's point number one. I've heard people make arguments as to the fact that, oh, Nigeria started first as 2 major regions, and then came to be 3, came to be 4, became 12 states, and then eventually 19 states, 21 states, and 36 states in Abuja, and how all that has not solved our problems. But I said to you that those formations were decreed, they were not discussed. So those who hold on to that as a reason to say that what we need is value orientation rather than restructuring, lose sight of the reality. Those were decreed geographical expressions. What Nigerians want is to understand the terms of our collective existence. And I tell you, ISHIOMA, that when we restructure, this problem about states not being able to pay salaries will diminish. When we restructure, corruption will diminish, and I'll tell you why. First, resources. When you devolve power from the component regions, what happens? Resources will be deemed to belong to a people. Now, this alibi...
I can't fault, and a lot of people can't fault that assertion.
When you understand where I'm coming from, you find out that you can't fault it.
Okay.
Now, when resources belong to a people, this alibi of saying that we're going to Abuja every month end to collect federal allocation will diminish. And then the man in the local government knows how much the state makes. So the state governors cannot lie to them. And when you know exactly what your state makes and you know what it gives to the federal government, you can demand responsible governance from your governors. You can insist on the local government chairman to do what is right. But when you always have an alibi, you can blame Abuja. That is why corruption first starts.
Let us look at states like, let's use 2 classical examples, Delta State and Edo State under the previous administrations. We saw when Dr. James Ibori was governor of Delta State, we read and we've seen some of the shocking recoveries and testimonies made on how he plundered the resources of the state. Let's not also forget Mr. Lucky Gbenedo in the Edo State and how he plundered resources. Now, people are of the opinion that by the time you put absolute power in these state governors and in the local government chairmen, what is the guarantee that they will be able to use the same resources for their people? What will change?
It's more, that argument is more emotional than logical, more emotional than deep. Because let me tell you, if I have control of my resources, I am more keen, I'll be more keen to manage it effectively. Really? My children would demand, yes, all over the world. That's why federalism exists the way it exists. Let me tell you, you just talked about James Onanifo Ibori, you talked about Lucky Gbenedo. These men at different times had Abuja to blame. They will tell you that Abuja hasn't given us money, meanwhile Abuja has. But when the paradigms change, and they are the ones giving money to Abuja, the man in the village, the man in the local government will look them in the face and say, don't tell me about Abuja. We know how much we generate, and we know how much we pay to Abuja. What have you done with our monies? It is a different kettle of fish entirely. And I do sincerely want to say here that our country must first of all, because the major corruption that we have is that we're not true to what we say on paper. We call ourselves the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ISHIOMA, but what we have is a unitary system. In federalism and federations, power devolves from the federating units, from bottom to top. But here, we have an all-powerful federal government, and state governments are best are beggarly appendages of the federal government.
Who is to be blamed for this shortfall? You can't, because it seems that everybody's blaming the executive arm of government, forgetting the fact that the legislative have a bigger role to play in restructuring Nigeria. But every day we watch our honorable senators sit, and we are still wondering, what do they do exactly? Because no one of them have taken the initiative to say, let us amend certain, provisions in the Constitution that have not given power to the federating unit. So who is to be blamed?
Fantastic question, ISHIOMA. I'll come to that, but let me lay another foundation so that you understand where who actually should be blamed. The truth is, as you and I talk, when people, again, talk about the need for value orientation, you ask yourself, if you have an over-wielding and overbearing federal government, how can values be established? Who is repudiating who? Who's correcting who? Who's criticizing who? I think that first, after 16 years, now 17 years of democratic experience, the National Assembly has fundamentally failed the people in not reworking the Constitution. Because if they had, this issue about electricity would have been dealt with. There are several states in this country that can use waste to generate power. But because of the unwielding Constitution that gives the power to the federal government to manage our resources, almost everything that is beneath the earth, and then power and the likes, and managed by the federal government. And then the state governments have become beggars, and not only beggars, they have become uninspiring, unadventurous, and they are lazy because the Constitution excuses that laziness. And that is why state governments who can otherwise generate resources have refused to generate resources, and they're depending on the federal government. So what you need to do is restructure the enterprise such that you give a lot of responsibilities to the states. And interestingly, the vice president about 4 days ago actually came to clarify the air that he wasn't saying that restructuring is not necessary, because he's been at the forefront of asking for state police and several reworking of our federal structure. I'll give you a practical instance, ISHIOMA. At some point, Lagos tinkered with power generation, and they were able to generate a few wattage into the national grid. But the politics of can you under the law or can't you under the law came in the way. I think that if states are allowed to generate power, if states are allowed to have state police, crime will be curtailed sizably. The issue of what happened in Enugu State, where the Fulani headsman came on Nibo, wouldn't have happened, because the governor will be able to talk to the state commissioner of police and give him directives because he has state police. But save and except we look at these fundamentals and dispassionately assess them as such, those who think that the reworking of this superstructure is not necessary at this point are just not fair to Nigeria. Nigerians need the basis upon which to be patriotic. Nigerians must understand that we all belong together, and the way to do that is to engage the people dispassionately and make everybody strong stakeholders in Nigeria. I'll give you a practical instance again. The reason people are complaining about the federal government appointments and the likes is because we have an unwielding federal government. If you have state governments that have a sizable autonomy and they are contributing to the center, I don't think Nigerians will be so concerned about what is happening at that level. Because that's exactly why when people tell me that in America, at some point, J.F. Kennedy had his brother as the Attorney General of the nation. Of course it could happen in America, because the state of Texas has its own Senate, has its own Congress, has its own governor, and they contribute to the center. They don't care. What is important is that the states are moving well. And I tell you, ISHIOMA, Nasarawa State is just about getting into the deep in terms of salary payment. But do you know what? Nasarawa State has 34 mineral resources. They have the highest. And then how do you reconcile it? A state that has 34 mineral resources cannot pay salary? ISHIOMA,
Because they do not have control of the resources.
God bless you. Now, Plateau State has 32 mineral resources. Plateau State has salary problems. Kaduna State has 28 mineral resources. That is how you have wealth everywhere, but the states are not enabled by the law to fully appropriate that. That is why we need to restructure this country
now let's go
so
back.
that states can use their resources for progress and contribute to the center.
So now let's go back to the legislative, because at the end of the day, the buck stops at their table. If restructuring, the call to restructure, the call to amend the constitution starts and stops on their table. But what are they doing?
I have said time without
We haven't gone. I'm yet to see Nigerians probably take the placards and banners and go to the gates of the National Assembly and begin to demand good governance, responsible governance from our legislative. So who is to be blamed?
In all sincerity, just about 2 months ago, there was Occupy National Assembly. I think the Nigerians are rising to the ante.
Nigerians are rising. That ended.
Nigerians are rising.
And the argument came up. Saying that at the end of the day, some of these people, some of the protesters were sponsored. But was the aim, the aim of occupying National Assembly, was it materialized?
At that point, yes. At that point,
no.
Yes. No, the aim at that point, no, let's put
it did not
information properly.
materialize.
No, let's put information properly. The reason they occupied National Assembly at that point was to make the National Assembly drop the idea of reworking the laws that has to do with the Code of Conduct Tribunal. And that purpose was 100% successful. I think that Nigerians are rising to the challenge. Nigerians are beginning to wake up, and they're saying to this National Assembly, stop bothering us about constituency process, stop bothering us about whether you want to impeach the president or not, stop bothering us about frivolities, stop bothering us about whether you want monies from the executive or otherwise. Bother us with issues about constitutional amendment and resource control through fiscal federalism and the overhaul of our superstructure. Now, I'll tell you this. I started with a scripture. What can the righteous do if the foundation is faulty? That means that even if you have the greatest integrity, if the foundation is bad, you just may not be able to do anything. I'll give you a practical instance again.
Even though you have
if you have the best man, yes. Okay. If the foundation is faulty, you can't do anything. That is the truth. And I'll give you a practical instance. When we didn't have such a wonderful First Republic political actors, but we had successful First Republic. You know why? Because the structure allowed for it. In the Southwest, the Cocoa House was built from cocoa. Liberty Stadium was built from cocoa.
Now, wouldn't we attribute that also to the caliber of leaders we had as at that time? We had the likes of Tafawa Balewa, we had the likes of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, we had the likes of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, men of integrity.
No, you're being political here.
No, I'm not being political.
Now let me tell you why.
But at the end of the day,
let me tell you why I'm laughing.
Men of integrity.
These men that you have called their names were murdered in 1966.
But today,
so many of them were murdered in 1966
we look at the papers. Today we look at the papers and we have issues of, corruption, false declaration of assets, and all of that. We have members of the representatives who right now are facing what I can call, a mini tribunal, even amongst themselves, for soliciting for sex outside the country and all of this. So don't you think the reason why we also have not achieved that much success is because of the caliber of people we have today in leadership?
I absolutely disagree. Let me tell you why. I'll quote from Major Kaduna Chukwumanzogu's school. Yeah. He said, corruption and 10%ers are taking over our politics. The nation that we dreamt of has been destroyed because inefficiency, corruption, and nepotism have become the order of the day. Then, our politicians were not saints. They were not so much of, in 1959, almost all of them, all the names you called here were indicted for corruption. I hope you're aware.
Which we can also say,
in 1959, 1958.
Those allegations were also faulted.
The truth, who faulted them?
They were faulted.
Who faulted
They were
them?
faulted.
No, who faulted them? The truth is, let me land. The truth is that the reason those republics were successful was that the structure allowed for resource control, fiscal federalism, and the states were able to generate resources, pay salaries, build roads, fund education, such that we had beautiful cities like Enugu, Ibadan, Kaduna, and several other places. And we had silos of cocoa, the pyramids of granite, the beautiful cities and educational sites were built until the army decided to rupture that structure. So it wasn't so much about the sainthood or saintliness of the First Republic politicians. It was about a structure that was nice. Okay. When the military messed up the structure and created a pseudo-federalism that is so much of a unitary system, we lost everything. And I think that the way to go is to make governance responsible again. And that way is simply through restructuring. When the states begin to control their resources, you find out that you will not have civil society groups going to Abuja to protest. They go to their doorsteps because they know exactly what every state gets and they know exactly what the state pays to the federal government. I think that that is fundamentally the way to go. Let us not begin to pet issues. Value orientation must be predicated on a superstructure that is acceptable to the people, not a military decree like we have as the 1999 Constitution.
There is another issue. And could it be that also informed the executives, skeptic nature on the topics or the issue of restructuring Nigeria? Now, let's look at the Biafra, the agitation for Biafra. If we are to restructure Nigeria and a certain part of the country comes out to say, we want to live on our own, we want to leave the entity called Nigeria, don't you think the reason why we're not having restructuring at the fore right now is because of that fear? Because the leaders today do not want any part of the country to break away and have its own entity.
I love analytical responses to issues. I'm going to give you 7 reasons why that fear is unfounded. I'm going to tell you exactly why it is just political and political to nurse those fears. Really? And the first is the fact that, ISHIOMA, Biafra is an agitation by the Southeast, the Igbos. Are you aware?
Yes.
Outside the indigenous population in every state in this country, the highest population outside the indigenous population is the Igbo population. In Lagos, about 55% of properties, choice properties in Lagos, allegedly belongs to the Igbos. You think they want to go? You think they want to go? That's point number 1. Now, what they are asking for is for a true sense of belonging. Every Nigerian must be treated equally. We must negotiate the terms of our collective existence. If we want true federalism, we'll go by federalism. If we want confederacy, we'll go by confederacy. If we want a unicameral legislature, let's discuss it and save money. Let us look at how we make this country great again. That's point number 1. Then number 2, the Yorubas have contributed strongly to the upkeep of this country. And Lagos, for instance, is an example of how Nigerians can live together. And now, when you have this kind of example, and Lagos has shown the way in that wise, and obviously, if Lagos is working, it means that Nigeria can work. So we have an example of togetherness. 3, even the North has come to the realization of the fact that we belong together. And that is why, time and again, they struggle, they make mistakes sometimes, but they struggle to see that this entity is not broken. Everybody across the divides of this country, ISHIOMA, believes that together as one Nigeria, we can lead Africa away from poverty to promise. But they want the terms of that engagement spelled out, and they want justice, equity, and fairness to be the summum bonum. That's point number 4. Okay. Then number 5, ISHIOMA, is when you look at our political demograph, Nigeria is a cord of 3. Even the scripture says again that the cord of 2 is strong. The cord of 3 is not easily broken. Now, as you and I talk, look at the demograph. That's the 5th point. The demograph gives you a super cord of 3. Nigeria is split by the confluence of Benue and the Niger rivers. And you have a big north, you have the former eastern region, southeast now, and then you have the west. As you and I talk, our tendencies, point number 6, is of 3 major religions: traditional religion, Christianity, and Islam. We all share an affinity. We belong together, and we want to fulfill God's promise on planet Earth. And then point number 7, those who fear, and this is for those who fear that Nigeria may break. Discussion and negotiating the terms of our collective engagement does not mean disintegration. Those who impose forceful togetherness are the ones who actually threaten, like the former vice president said, threaten the nation's unity. They did that with Soviet Union. Where's Soviet Union today? They did that with Yugoslavia. Where is it today? You will always end up balkanizing nations when you insist on forced unity. But when you discuss, like the United Kingdom, when you discuss, like the United States, when you discuss, like Australia, which is a continent, when you discuss the terms of your collective engagement, you will find peace, because every component part belongs together, respects each other, and understands that on these terms, our existence is established. When you cannot say exactly on which terms, ISHIOMA, the first lie that we have as a nation is the fact that we call ourselves the Federal Republic of Nigeria on paper, whilst in actuality we're a unitary system. That's first lie. The second lie as a nation, which is the most painful, is that you have a 1999 constitution, which is the product of a decree, Decree 24. And it tells you that we, the people gathered, haven't agreed to live together. Did we? That's second lie as a nation. Second lie as a nation. The third lie is that those who think that this country will break up if we decide to restructure and negotiate do not have facts and figures to back it up. What we need, what we need as a people is to give each other a strong sense of respect, sit together, and discuss the terms of our collective engagement. And when we do, you will find out that Nigerians are truly, truly great people.
Discuss the terms of our relationship with one another in Nigeria. But let's go on this short commercial break. When we come back, we'll go into the other lap of the program. Stick around, it's CROSSFIRE.
To enjoy more of these our Ogbonge videos when you just watch, press this button to subscribe on top of our YouTube page. You go love am.